Welcome to Golf and the Good Life, your guide to golf travel across the pond. I'm DJ Jones, joined as always by my good friend Connor Evers, and today we have the conclusion of our two-part episode sharing 10 questions to ask your golf travel company. But before we get there, Connor, field reports from the 2025 season are coming in hot and fast. We actually, just before we came on, a couple came in to me from Royal Port Rush. Great to see. What's the latest and greatest up at H&B HQ?
Deej, appreciate it. And correct. The weather has been amazing overseas. We are recording this on the 1st of May, 2025, and a few groups have traveled and already came back from overseas. First kind of group started the middle part of April, and it's been amazing weather overseas. I just had a group play the Old Course a couple days ago, and it was 65 degrees and sunny in late April. Does not get much better than that. Fantastic field reports. Weather has been amazing. As we always do, a few shout outs to a few of our groups that have traveled overseas. Members from Evanston Golf Club, Old Sandwich Golf Club, Pittsburgh Field Club, and San Diego Country Club. But looking forward to today's episode too, finishing this series up, Deej.
Yeah, the field reports have been great. We had a couple of gents sent some the other day, and they were in shorts playing Port Marnock, or at least one of them was in shorts. So always great to see. I mean, it's here we are, not even to summer yet, and it's looking that way. So knock on wood, that will continue. And it's funny, you were just talking about the members who were traveling with us here the next couple of weeks, and that's just a handful of the clubs that are represented here, over the coming days. And years ago, a PGA professional who's in our travel program, he called us the country club of golf travel. And the other day I was making our newsletter, and in each edition during the season, I list off all the clubs who have members traveling with us over the couple weeks, more or less, in between the newsletter editions. And the last one had like 44 clubs on the list. Like, nothing says country club of golf travel more than that. But speaking of members, I have to give a quick shout out to Dan Wood. Dan is a longtime friend of H&B, traveled with us a handful of times. I hope he's listening out there at some point. He and his group have been over in Ireland, and they're actually finishing up their round, like as we speak, at Ardglass today. So Dan, quick shout out. Thanks for the support as always, and hope you had a great expedition to Ireland. But moving back to today's episode, as I mentioned earlier, we are wrapping up the second part of 10 questions to ask your golf travel company. As we did the last episode, and anytime we're talking about, golf tour operators and so forth, the quick disclaimer is that Connor and I both work with Haversham and Baker Expeditions. We are, in fact, a golf travel company. But as I hope we proved not only on the last episode, but the 57 episodes that have preceded it, this isn't going to be a 30-minute H&B sales pitch. Because as we have always believed, the rising tide lifts all boats. Our goal here is to simply help you have a better experience, whether you travel with us, another company, or do it yourself. And if we can help in that in some small way, in the end, it does help us. So this isn't going to be an H&B sales pitch, but Connor, let's kind of get back to the questions. And I guess we got to talk a little about price.
Correct. Yeah. And kind of the next question here and starting off this episode is, will my pricing change after I book? And this is a biggie, one that you really need to look into. And I would suggest reading anything when it comes to the pricing or really, frankly, the terms and conditions, how it may change, because every company does it a little bit differently. And we talked about multiple times in past few episodes and just kind of overall since we've started this podcast is, a lot of these trips and what have you, you have to book these out months and at times years out before you depart. And you have to kind of understand, if you're booking a trip now for 2026, a lot of times the rates on those hotels and golf courses, what have you, are priced for this year. And sometimes that difference of price, you'll have to pay it at a later date, maybe on your final payment, or it's not a thing. It really, really depends. And it's something you have to ask the travel company and just understand fully of how that will be affected in the future for you. Inevitably, prices do go up, and especially in the most recent years, and it's going to really focus on, what will happen when it comes to the pricing. Again, just from a rate perspective alone.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, like you said, some of these trips are priced 2 years out. and they're priced before we even have the rates for the year you're trying to travel. So if the company is building the pricing around what are soon to be outdated rates, you need to understand how that's going to affect you. Currency is another biggie that you got to kind of factor in because obviously you're heading overseas where they're using the British pound and the euro. And so it's important to understand how any currency fluctuation is going to impact the price because if you're working with a company that's based overseas, they're probably pricing your trip in either pounds or euros, depending on either where you're going or where they're based. And if they're doing so, the couple things to factor is that number one, your credit card company, when you go to pay that bill, they're not going to do that exchange for nothing. I mean, they might claim that there's no fee or what have you, but they're not your pal. They're making money on that exchange one way or the other, whether it's a fee that they're charging you or an exchange rate that is less than ideal. So you got to know that going in when it's priced in a foreign currency. But then the other is if it's priced that way, a lot of times you're making a deposit up front, say half the trip, and then you're paying the balance closer to departure. Well, in that year or 18 months or whatever it might be, if the currency fluctuates, you're totally exposed to that shift. It's great if the dollar gets stronger, but if it gets weaker as it has over the past month or two, that's going to come out of your pocket in the end, at least for the second payment that you have to make. So just one thing to kind of keep in mind. And then if you're working with a company that's based in the US, they're probably pricing it in the US dollars. But again, it's important to understand how they're going to handle currency. At H&B, we have kind of, I would call it like a shared approach to the currency shift that may or may not happen in between. And, we spell it out pretty clearly in our proposals and on our website and so forth. But it's important to understand how they're going to handle any kind of currency shift. It's not to say that any one approach is better than the other. It's just something you got to kind of know going into it.
Yeah, you're definitely right. And even, a few cents, if it's a couple cents, from the dollar to the pound or to the euro, you may not think it's a big difference, but it can add up. And like you said, you got to really understand what each company's policy is and how that can be affected in the long term. So the next question up is what happens if something goes wrong during the trip? And when I'm speaking to a lot of groups, especially group captains, maybe for that first phone conversation about just the overall trip, and this is a question that comes up very commonly. And we'd love to say that every trip goes perfect, and usually they do, but sometimes something happens. It could be weather, and your flight could be delayed. Your bags could not make it. We talked about it last year. We had a gentleman that his bag literally got stolen at the Shannon Airport. Anything can really happen. Hopefully that doesn't in the future, but anything can. More often than not, really kind of speaking more into us, as H&B and a lot of travel companies as well, but more specifically to us too. And really the strength of our relationships of the ground transportation partners, such as our coaching companies or the rental vehicle companies. A lot of that can be dealt with very swiftly and before you even arrive. If we do know there's a delay, a lot of the issues that do arise are from flight, cancellations or changes, what have you. But a lot of that can be done beforehand. But when it can't, there's the bat phone. And again, kind of speaking more into us at H&B. The bat phone is a provided service that we offer here at H&B. And essentially it's a 24/7 phone service. So we'll be up whenever there may be a question or issue that may arise that we can help with and get you back in the fairways, as we like to say. And I'll say this example, it's a perfect one. So happened a couple years ago. We had a group traveling from the States over to Manchester, and they had a rival day golf at Royal Lytham and St. Anne's. And it was 8 gentlemen, and one of the gentlemen was unfortunately on a different flight than the others, and his was postponed for multiple hours past. And they made it a decision for the 7 gentlemen to continue on and to play Royal Lytham and St. Anne's. Well, the other gentleman was able to get on a different flight. And from the time that this all happened, I was trying to coordinate with the driver host and the club to kind of figure out what the best option was for this gentleman. Long story short, he was able to meet up with the group on the 11th tee box, I believe, and played in. And with the help, again, with myself and our team, as well as the driver host, we were able to move one of their other tee times back further. And he was able to play the front 9. I think it was one through 9. And the 10th hole, staff member from the club was able to get him on the 10th green. So he was able to play all 18 holes, just a little bit different, obviously, than what he thought. But that's something that you're may not thinking of it when you're looking at the proposal or putting your deposit down, but it can pay dividends, once you're over if something does, come up. So again, we like to say nothing does, but sometimes stuff happens. And that's just one testimony of many.
Yeah, I mean it's international travel. Stuff happens. It just comes with the territory. It's part of the business. The mark of a great company is not, how they perform when everything goes right. It's how they perform when something goes wrong. And the bat phone is a great example, but you touched earlier on the relationships, and that is really where it comes down to. Are you working with a company that has decades that they have spent building those relationships overseas, whether it's with the driver hosts and the caddy masters and the hotel concierge and what have you? Because got to tell you, I mean, the vast majority of things that might pop up along the way, we don't ever hear about because our partners take care of it. Those hospitality professionals overseas do what they do best, and they're the ones that get you back in the fairway. And so those relationships are what's so vitally important. I mean, that example from Royal Lytham, they didn't have to do that. And I'm not saying they necessarily did it just because it was an HMB group, but it's just a perfect example of how those relationships can impact your experience in the end. So, speaking of the experience, my next one is, what are your favorite off course experiences in the area? Now, obviously, we're biased. This is Golf in the Good Life. We've talked about it so many times that your experience off the golf course is just as valuable as your time on it. And when you're talking to your planner or your advisor, asking them this question is really going to tell you just how experienced they are, because their experience, their firsthand knowledge of where the best pubs are, why you should do this distillery instead of that one, why this castle is maybe not worth your time, but this other one is. All of that ultimately leads to a better experience for you. So when you're talking to them and you ask this question, and if the answer feels like it's pulled from TripAdvisor or ChatGPT or what have you, that probably tells you everything you need to know, because ultimately their personal experience will have an impact on yours.
You're definitely right, DJ. And you can tell once you receive these items, and maybe some companies just don't. You're kind of on your own. It's like, hey, figure it out. Whitney, our director of member services, and her team, put together customized touring and other items, and they also customize it to the point where they are recommending certain things for your group. If it's a couples group, if it's just gents, depending on maybe your food offerings, or there's an allergy, stuff like that. That's the personalization, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that is very keen to some of our groups that they travel over. And kind of the next thing, is there a course we might be overlooking? A lot of groups come to us and come to many golf tour operators for the big name courses. They want to go to St. Andrews and play the old Carnoustie, Kings Barnes, or up to Northern Ireland and Portrush and County Down. We get it, and you definitely want to play those and knock those off the bucket list. But there's other hidden gems out there, like Ardglass in Northern Ireland, or Ely in St. Andrews, or Fortrose and Rose Marquis up in the Inverness area in the Highlands. Those are the courses that can be a great experience, an add-on. Perfect example last year is a group of mine from Salt Lake Country Club, and they played Ely. And it was one of those days, I think it was a 36-hole day between the new course and Ely. And their trip was amazing. I think they played, if I remember and recall, it was Gullen number 1, North Berwick, Muirfield, Old Course, New Course, Carnoustie, Kings Barnes. I mean, what a lineup of courses. And their favorite one, and one of them that they placed in their survey, was Ely. They just had an amazing afternoon. They played it, like I said, after the new course, and they just had a ball, they said. And it's those experiences that, kind of make the trip. And it's not what you think it may be. And it's super fun. So, those are kind of the firsthand experiences that's just completely invaluable for the overall experience.
Yeah, I mean the best professionals in this business, they're gonna know where you need to play beyond the usual suspects. I mean, and like you said, I mean, we hear it all the time. Kilspindie was my favorite round of the trip. Never mind, they played Muirfield or wherever else they might have gone, but so much of that has to do with expectations. You come into Muirfield with expectations. You don't arrive to Kilspindie with any expectations, and so and they just get blown away. And those courses are all over the place, but it takes someone that knows where to find them.
Yeah, I mean, when I went over into the Channel Coast to England a few years ago, did I go online and watch the final round of Colin Morikawa winning at Royal St. George's before I played it? Maybe. I knew what to expect, but you won't really have that expectation when you play Prince's, or we can watch Francesco Molinari's last round at Carnoustie, but you really don't have much insight on Ely, and those are the cool experiences. So it's testament exactly what you just said, DJ.
100%. And you touched on it earlier, and this ties into personalization, and it ties into my last question, which is how do you make our trip feel personalized? The modern golf traveler, they crave experiences that are unique to them. It's not just the golf travel. This is travel as a whole. As international travel has become, more or less standard for so many people, we all want to be able to post on Insta about something that, that we did that nobody else had done. Or we want to be able to tell our fellow members that, oh yeah, you went to Carnoustie. Well, I went to Panmure next door and I sat in the Hogan Lounge. And a lot of this, it takes having someone in your back pocket that knows, again, where to find those places. And it is just so easy to spot an itinerary that has been kind of just pulled off the shelf. It has the usual suspect courses. It's got a date already there. The hotels, like everything is essentially locked in, as opposed to an experience with an advisor that starts with them asking you questions and getting to know you and your group and your preferences and what you want to do before you ever put anything to paper. The more they know, that the more that trip is going to feel like it's yours. So if they come to you and they just fire back a quote without asking you a single question, you've got a pretty good idea of how much personalization there's going to be. And really, it just means that there's not going to be any. If you're wanting just the 36 hole, nothing but bucket list, check off the boxes trip, okay, there's a lot of folks that can do that perfectly fine. But if you're wanting an experience that is yours, it takes asking this question in order to get there.
So we've gone through the 10 questions, and the last one, I'll call it a bonus question, is can I just book this trip and everything on my own? And certainly, yeah, you could. Something I get asked all the time when I have the discussions with initial group captains. And yeah, you definitely could. But really, when it comes down to it, I mean, you're probably just booking the general items of golf, transportation, lodging, and those things we talked about, the personalization, those different items, you're just not going to get. You may not have enough time to put it together, especially if you have a bigger group of 8 or more. But it's really just the knowledge of myself or another planner from a company that really makes the trip what it is, and it increases the value of the overall experience when you're overseas. Once you go through this and you ask these questions to the company as well as your other travel companions, you're going to figure out, which one is the one you should go for, or even booking on yourself if you'd like as well. So hopefully this helped, and definitely ask those questions that can get you off and running for your trip.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a big one there at the end, and that's also talking to your group. It's important to have this dialogue amongst everybody within the group. Get everybody on the same page. We got a whole episode devoted to that, so go back and have a listen. But at least in terms of the questions to ask your golf travel company, hopefully this provided some insight. Listen, if you've got others that you think we missed along the way, we'd love to hear your feedback. Or if you've got questions about planning your trip or what have you, as we always say, don't hesitate to send them golf@haversham.com, or you can DM us on social media. We will also link to plenty of things in the show notes regarding this episode. But that is going to draw this one to a close. We will be back again soon with another episode. But until then, we wish you plenty of golf at its finest and life at its best.